writers. There's a short story called The Lesson by a writer named Tony Cade Bambara. And in that story, a bunch of little kids from the poor sections of New York City go with a school teacher into the rich parts of Manhattan where they visit a toy store, the kind of toy store they could only dream about. And at one point in that story, their teacher, Miss Moore, says to them, "Where we are is who we are." And that sentence should be pretty easy to figure out. It suggests that place, setting, changes us, that we are different people in different places. For example, here at Towson University, I am a different person than I am when I'm at home. Here, I'm a teacher. Who are you when you're here at Towson University? You're a student, sure. But in what other ways are you different? Are you an RA? Do you have a job? Do you do work study? Do you spend more time reading? Maybe you just come here to walk your dog. And who are you at the shopping mall? How does it change what you want? Your purpose, how you behave? Is it different if you're shopping for a niece's birthday? Is it different if you're wearing a bib and working at Starbucks? Is it different if you're with a bunch of friends or your mom? How are you a different person depending on where you're shopping? And what if you're going out with friends for an evening, to a club, to dance? How do you dress? How do you behave? How are you a completely different person than if you're at home? Because at home, you have different expectations, right? You might be living with different people. Your behavior might have to be different. Maybe you prefer home on a Friday night. All this is going to be true for your characters too. Imagine, for example, that your character is at the Johnny Appleseed Festival at your local farm orchard place. The whole experience of the festival is going to be different depending on who your character is and how your character interacts with the setting. Does your character feel great nostalgia, have childhood memories of coming to this festival years ago? Or is your character a beleaguered parent who has to negotiate her kids through the place without them crying too much? Or maybe your kid is a college student who works here this weekend among all this pandemonium, who has a lot of other things to worry about. Everything that you see here is going to be different depending on who you are. Everything that happens is going to be different depending on who your character is. Say you're in the woods, in a forest. What happens in that setting? Who are you here? Are you a person who dreams of elves and fairies populating the space? Maybe you're a hunter and you're looking for signs. Maybe you're a hiker and you're enjoying wildflowers. You could be a bored teenager just looking for a place to go where you can vape, where you can smoke without parents around. What kind of stories happen here? Could it be a story about love? Could it be a story about family? So where we are really is who we are. It's also important to remember that places, that setting, can stoke our imaginations. Places stoke our imagination in a variety of ways. A place looks spooky, or it looks serene. Think old abandoned home versus Japanese Zen garden. But it's not just those immediate ways that places reach into our psyches and give us something to write about. One of my mentors, a guy named Jim Whitehead, a poet and fiction writer and former offensive lineman, who was about 6'6" and had the biggest face I've ever seen, was trying to rock me into writing something that really mattered. I guess I wasn't doing that very much. And he said to me, "Downs," and he said this with a cigarette in his hand, because he always had a cigarette in his hand. And he'd take a big puff, and then he'd say, "Downs, where's your soul?" And I said, "Jim, I don't know what you mean. What do you mean, where's my soul?" Jim took a deep breath, sucked on his cigarette. He said, "We come from where we get the wound. Where did you get the wound?" Okay. So that gave me something to think about. What was the wound? What was my wound? What was the thing I'd felt most profoundly in my life? A loss, a pain, a grief, a separation, a profound change. And where did that happen? And what I thought was interesting was that, again, he was sort of saying that places define us. The wound is inextricably linked to the place. You can't separate them. Figure out where you got the wound, write about that place. So that's why place might matter. That's why it's important in our lives, in our characters' lives. But now on a practical matter, what do you do with it? Flannery O'Connor said, the problem is to make the concrete work double time. She, of course, didn't mean the concrete that was cement before it hardened. She's talking about the things in our stories that are concrete as opposed to abstract, right? Time is abstract, but a clock is concrete. Love is abstract, but a hug is concrete. Age is abstract, but a white beard is concrete. So there's your problem. How to make those things in your story, the setting, have a purpose in your story. So it's not just background. I read a lot of stories often by young writers, where the place just seems to be a background. It's an apartment somewhere. It's a coffee shop somewhere. And what happens in it could happen anywhere. I think what Flannery is saying is that your story has to happen somewhere, and that somewhere has to matter, so that it can't be a story that could happen anywhere. It has to be a story that could only happen right there. And you can do this by using, check the PowerPoint now, these techniques. Atmosphere. believability, motive, conflict, situation. So, atmosphere. Here you're using the setting to say something about the character, to reveal something that you've learned about the character, how the character feels about a particular place at a particular moment, what the character notices in that environment, and how those things make the character feel. A particular political sign in the yard makes a person feel one way, might make another character feel another way. And you're using that information to set the mood for the story. And there's a great example on the PowerPoint from Amapola, Urrea's short story. So be sure to read that. Believability. This is related to what we call verisimilitude, which is a really significant word and has in it two parts. Similitude, which is related to similar, and vera, which is related to verity, which is a truth, or verify. So here what we're talking about is that which is similar to the truth, similar to reality. And when you're trying to tell a story, you need some authority. You want people to believe your story, and one of the ways you do that is you give them a very realistic setting. A setting where the details are spot on. So that anyone who's going to that place would say, oh yeah, yep, I know that. Say you're setting a story in an industrial cafeteria somewhere. A detail that might make it sure that you know what you're talking about is that they keep aloe plants on hand. So that when there are burns, the people working in the cafeteria can cut a piece of aloe and treat their burn. That's the kind of detail that says you really know the setting in which you are working. It convinces the reader that you're not just making it all up. Motive. The character's wishes, goals, aspirations all involve that particular place. Do you have to get out? Do you have to escape? Is your life in danger because of where you are? Or, like the grandmother in A Good Man Is Hard to Find, do you just want to go on a family vacation to Tennessee and not to Florida? Conflict. Now the character struggles against a place, not just because of it. Maybe the person's homeless and the weather's bad and the community is against your character. Any of those sorts of things can create a situation in which setting is almost the central purpose in a story. For other examples, check out Brownies and the Third Dumpster. A great example of setting as conflict. An Irish novelist 10 years or so ago published a book called Room, in which a mother and her son were kept locked up in a shed, basically, by a madman who was the father of the boy and abused the woman. Setting as conflict. Setting as situation. This one is tough. This one is not easy. Because it might sound like I'm going to be saying that setting serves in this case as a symbol. And you know I am not big on symbols. No writer is. So we're not really saying that. What are we saying? We're saying that setting can serve as a kind of reflection of the situation the character is in. if the character's problem is that they want to get out of town, maybe one part of the setting is that their door always jams, and they have trouble getting out of their door at their apartment every morning, and they have trouble getting back in at night. They have trouble going places. So the door mirrors that, adds to that sense of frustration. It's not a symbol, it's a reflection. There's a great example of that in The Wig, when the character looks outside and sees the mist falling. And that character isn't full of grief at the moment, but isn't over grief. It's not a storm outside, nor is it sunny. It's a mist. It's a reflection of his situation. Finally, here's something about setting that strikes me morally and strikes me viscerally. And it begins with the knowledge that 6 million Jewish people were killed by Hitler's policies called the Final Solution. Many in death camps, extermination camps. And millions of other civilians lost their lives similarly. And we remember them at places like the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., at the sites of the camps throughout Europe. And I've visited one of those camps. And I've spoken often with people who have also visited those camps and people who have visited the museum in D.C. And it astonishes me, amazes me how often what really stays with all of us are the displays of the shoes people were wearing before they died. Why the shoes? Why is that what we remember? The only explanation I can come up with has to do with setting, has to do with place. That our feet are how we connect to the earth, how we best know, how we most often come in contact with setting. Floors, asphalt roads, railroad tracks, dusty paths through the woods. We wear hiking boots. We wear high heels. We wear sneakers. We go barefoot. We're in ballet slippers. I think through the feet, through our character's shoes, we can understand them better in various moments. We can know where they are and who they are. And I'm going to add to that one final tip that I gleaned from an interview with a film director who said that the most important thing for him in any shot was knowing where the light was coming from. Sunlight through a window, nasty fluorescent lights overhead, a candle behind someone, a flashlight. I think that if you know in every scene you write where your character's feet are and from where the light in that scene is coming, your scene will take on a richness and a vibrancy and an importance
that you might not have anticipated. So setting, it's great. It matters. Make your story rich with it. Think about where it's happening and why that place matters. And revise, rewrite. Let the place surprise you maybe as much as the characters do.